Would you save the kingdom that wrongly betrayed you?
Exiled. The Divided Region, Book 1 by D.J.J. Watson. Chapter 1. Steel boots thundered down the corridors, yanking Darius from the depths of sleep. His heart ceased before his eyes even opened. The way the footfalls pounded with alarming speed carried the rhythm of midnight arrests until they stopped just outside his door. He barely had time to push himself upright on his bed when the oak barrier exploded inward, splintering on its hinges. There, 3 towering silhouettes filled the doorway, their cloaks catching the firelight. The hearth danced and cowered, casting twisted shadows across masks that had become legend in Valencia, the Crimson Guard. Spearheading the charge was Alistair. "What's happening?" Darius demanded. "Is this another test?" "This isn't about your apprenticeship, nor your graduation." "Then what is it?" "I cannot share such details." His mentor's words came out dark and heavy. "The king has summoned you. Now come along. We mustn't keep your father waiting." Silence fell over the chamber as the fire continued to crackle and weave. His eyes drifted to the other 2 guards flanking Alistair, their stillness betraying years of rigid discipline. He noted how their armored hands rested on their sword hilts. One shred of resistance, and their steel would sing. He studied their midnight intrusion with a skeptical eye. The timing, their stance, Alistair's grim gaze, none of it seemed like protocol. The excitement of tomorrow's official induction into the Legion fell out from beneath him, leaving him with a hollowness that had no end. Was his father scheming again? Was it too much to bear that his son picked the Crimson Guard over his duties as the Prince of Valencia? He looked out the window behind him towards the night sky, where countless stars twinkled overhead. The last time he was awoken like this, he and Dillian were escorted to their parents' quarters, where they found their father weeping beside their lifeless mother. The vision of him clutching her hand and kissing it profusely, praying she would rise from her cruel slumber, never left his memory. A vicious strain of fever ran rampant that winter, claiming many thousands of lives across the kingdom. It tore through every city and village, striking down anyone with a pulse. By luck or the sky gods, he, Dillian, and their father were spared, but not without suffering a tragic loss. Alistair shifted with impatience, the plates of his armor clinking. Darius shrugged off his warm pelts and lowered his bare feet onto the chilly flagstone. "Have you sent for Dillian too?" "Just hurry along, lad." "Why are you being so coy with me? Has someone been taken ill?" He was met with silence. "Have Elrond attacked?" he asked. 10 years of peace had to end at some point. More silence. "I thought the suffering was the—" "It has nothing to do with your bloody apprenticeship," Alistair snapped, his tone sharp with frustration. Who was this man standing before him? The commander never shied from a stern telling off, but this was unrecognizable. "Put on your clothes and follow me." Darius frowned, but lacked the courage to protest more. He stood and pulled on his leathery attire, which included breeches, a gorget for his neck and shoulders, and a brown cuirass. It was ghastly apparel, but it would suffice until he received his full Crimson Guard gear. His scabbard rested on a cushioned bench, glowing by the hearth. Darius reached for his sword belt, his fingers mere inches from the worn leather, when Alistair told him to leave it. "Come, we mustn't delay." With a last glance at his weapon, he reluctantly followed the commander through the castle, where a haunting silence met them. Boots clicked against marble and granite, the sounds bouncing off gilded pillars and vaulted ceilings. Behind closed doors, candlelight flickered beneath the frames, their warm glow dimming as they passed the servant chambers. A dry lump caught in Darius's throat as his neck craned backwards. Both Crimson Guards shadowed him closely, stepping in perfect unison. "Alistair, surely you can—" "Quiet!" he cut him off. They turned into a corridor filled with bars of moonlight, filtering through the large panes of glass. Where normally the castle breathed with life, even at this hour, now it felt like a tomb. Gone were the scurrying servant girls. Gone were the whispered gossip from alcoves and the patrolmen making their rounds. Darius's fingers twitched, missing the familiar comfort of his sword hilt. Each step deeper into the deserted passageways only amplified the wrongness of it all. When they entered the courtyard, a group of guards waited at the bottom of the stone steps. Their horses stamped restlessly in the darkness, their nostrils blowing white plumes. Much like the halls they'd just vacated, an unnatural stillness gripped the castle grounds. "Have you readied the king?" Alistair asked one of them as they reached the base of the slope. The man nodded, his face concealed behind an iron helmet. "He's being escorted as we speak, sir. They will meet you at the rendezvous." "Very well. We'll take it from here." The guards gave Alistair and his men the reins and melted into the shadows. Despite Darius's best attempts to avoid asking more questions, unease compelled him otherwise. "As the prince of this kingdom, I demand you to tell me what's going on." The corners of Alistair's mouth tightened, his eyes boring into Darius with all the warmth of an Elronian winter. "You lack the authority to request that. Now get on your horse." Darius's shoulders slumped as his command fell on deaf ears, the words prince and kingdom hollow echoes in the night air. Alistair's locked gaze kept his tongue from moving any more. Reluctantly, he grabbed the leather reins and heaved himself into the saddle. As the horse shifted beneath his weight, he gazed around the empty courtyard, his heart still clinging to a childish hope that perhaps his father would emerge from the shadows, that a rare but crooked smile would stretch across his face, declaring this was all an elaborate initiation. But the stone walls remained silent. Metal groaned and chains clinked as Alistair and the flanking knights mounted their steeds. He raised a hand towards unseen figures stationed on the castle ramparts, and after a few heartbeats, the iron gate squeaked open. Yawning into view were Istral's sleeping streets and twinkling orange lanterns. Beyond towering city walls lay an inky void that stretched into the horizon, swallowing any hint of civilization. Moonlight glinted off cobblestones as Alistair's horse wove between shadowy buildings, its hooves barely making a sound. Each turn felt calculated, not the path of someone simply traveling, but of one evading detection. Darius watched his hunched shoulders, the way his head constantly swiveled, scanning narrow passages and dark corners. Twice they backtracked without explanation, once ducking beneath a low archway so tight Darius could have reached out and touched the damp stone walls on either side. The streets that should have been familiar now felt like a labyrinth, each twist revealing another unnamed alleyway. His grip tightened on the reins, a cold understanding seeping into his bones. This wasn't some cruel lesson or twisted trial. Besides a few curious head turns, they left the capital gates undetected. He glanced over his shoulder as the city's tiered streets and whitewashed buildings shrank into the darkness, their outlines blurring like ink bleeding into parchment. One by one, the scattered lantern lights winked out until Istral's colossal silhouette dissolved into the velvet blackness of the horizon. They travelled for what seemed an hour when a cluster of orange dots appeared in the distance. Torches. The pinpricks soon morphed into a battalion of crimson guards. Amongst the gathered soldiers stood his father's unmistakable white mount, Spirit. The majestic horse was his source of pride and joy, a steed Darius had always dreamed would one day inherit. It shared his rider's armor of intricate carvings depicting otherworldly beasts that glowed from the torches surrounding him. Darius's throat tightened as he met his father's gaze. Even now, confronting him as a grown man and a graduate of the guard, that stern face made him cower like a child. Alistair pulled their horses to a stop. "My king, your son gave us no trouble," he said. The slight falsehood ramped up Darius's nerves. Do you require anything further from me? Robic glanced at Darius before acknowledging his royal advisor. I wish only to be with him for this last leg of the journey. Go forth with your men and clear the path of any unwanted travelers. The open roads are rife with trouble this time of year. My lord. Alistair inclined his head and rode to the front of the battalion. Darius watched the departing figures shrink against the horizon, relief and anticipation churning in his gut. Father, what's going on? The words spilt out as their horses started moving towards the unknown destination. You know what you've done, Robic sighed. If this is about the Crimson Guard, you cannot change my mind. We've been through this already. A joyless laugh escaped his father's lips. I really don't understand you, do I? Darius's brows furrowed. It seems you lie as good as you wield a sword. What are you talking about? Your plot to kill me. Darius's throat seized over the outrageous claim. What? I know every seedy detail. You can't be serious. He waited for one of the Crimson Guards to break from the grim procession and declare this a sick prank, but none did. This has to be some joke. His father's jaw tightened beneath his greying beard, the movement barely visible in the gathering dark. You think we're travelling under nightfall for the fun of it? What do you take me for? A fool if you believe. Out of nowhere, a backhand found Darius's cheek. The strike nearly toppled him sideways, and it burned with pain. Do not insult me! Darius clasped his throbbing face, realization washing over him like a wave. His father meant every word. He truly believed Darius had plotted to kill him. I'll give it to you. Your plan didn't lack intricacy. The deadly tonic, the time you intended the servant girl to hand it to me, it was well put together. Do you know how strong that poison would have been? It had the potency to send 10 men into the void. The royal surgeon confirmed this. Not even our military has access to such a substance. The plan? The servant girl? Darius muttered, shaking his head. This is lunacy. Father, please. Well, Amelia performed her role effectively. She wore the look of a panicked goat when Alistair brought her before me. But I suppose that's a common reaction when one's plots are uncovered. What have you done with her? Robic groaned. She will face the guillotine at first light. Father, you must revoke her execution at once. She's only 18. His features twisted into a pained grimace that made him appear far older than his 22 years. Someone is plotting against us. This has Elrond's scent all over it. It's not Elrond or King Jeffor, you fool, Robic rebuked. The silence that followed was agonizing. I knew your love for the Crimson Guard was boundless, but to murder me so you could abdicate the throne and hand down kingship responsibilities to Dillion, that I did not see coming. I swear on everything I hold dear, whoever is behind this has fed you lies. Reveal them so I can slit their throat at once. Robic craned his head around, the lines on his face easing. Then I'd be left with no sons. Darius's breath died in his windpipe, his veins freezing into streams of ice. The sound of his brother's name stumbled from his lips, broken and unsteady. Dillion? Robic wore a mask of fury. Your denial is testing my patience. He showed me everything. Your scribes... My scribes? What in the realm is this? Your long hand doesn't lie. We may be strangers to each other, but I know your scribing hand well. It's a monstrosity. Trust that I took every measure to dispel the truth. Darius's vision glazed over, unfocused on the moonlit path ahead. The rhythmic sway of his mount faded into the background, each hoof a distant thud that barely registered as he wrestled with this revelation. Through the fog of his mind drifted images of wooden swords clashing in the great hall, of 2 young boys ducking behind tapestries and sprinting down corridors. He could almost hear Dillion's breathless laughter mixing with his own. He remembered the flushed cheeks on Alistair's face when they knocked over yet another precious vase. He recalled maids throwing their hands up in despair at muddy footprints tracked across freshly scrubbed floors. The muffled giggling they'd shared after father had scolded them, and the way Dillion's eyes would crinkle at the corners when they whispered confessions of first crushes. What went so gravely wrong? Darius's fingers traced the leather reins as the embers of their youth continued to flicker behind his pupils. How did he not spot the signs earlier? The same hands that had helped a young Dillion climb forbidden walls, that had clasped countless sworn oaths of brotherhood, had now penned his doom. Blood, it seemed, could turn to poison. Was I that bad of a father? Robick's words cut through his stupor. No, was all he said. Somewhere I must have failed you. This is as much my burden to carry as it is yours. Darius fell silent, his jaw clenching and unclenching as he gazed ahead at the slithering column of torches. Neither father nor son spoke as the stars dimmed one by one, giving way to the first whispers of grey light bleeding across the eastern sky. Remote farmsteads thinned out, replaced by endless meadows that rippled in the breeze. A dark line soon crept along the horizon, materializing into a wall of trees that stretched upwards until their uppermost branches disappeared into the low-hanging clouds. His mount's hooves crunched through crisp grass, and Darius's breath misted before him. Strange for summer. Each inhale filled his lungs with a biting coldness that made him pull his cuirass tighter around him. When Alistair and his knights came to a halt, Darius knew this was where he would meet his fate, in a desolate part of Valencia. In some ways, it was a fitting spot to execute a disgraced prince. His stomach swirled at the thought, not from fear of dying, but from the bitter taste of injustice. He had trained under Alistair, sacrificed his youth for the guard, and dodged death in the suffering. Now the knights would be his executioners, their crimson capes billowing in the pre-dawn breeze like omens of the blood soon to be spilt. "My lord," Alistair called out ahead, his voice an echo that rippled across the meadow. "Would you wish for one more moment with your son?" Robick's eyes carried an empty stare, devoid of the warmth they once held when Darius was a boy. His father's hands trembled slightly, betraying the emotions that ravaged him inside. "No. We've spoken enough. Let's get this over with already." The muscles in Darius's neck tensed as he turned towards his father. His lips parted, trembling with unspoken words, whilst he searched Robick's face for any flicker of mercy. The morning frost had settled in his father's beard like tiny crystals, but his blue eyes were firm and unmoving. The journey concluded here, and the pain of his silence cut deeper than any sword could. A shadow fell across Darius's mount. Alistair. His boots flattened the dew-covered grass, each step heavy with reluctance. When their gazes met, the usual stern features had softened. "Dismount your horse and come with me, lad." He snapped his neck towards Robick once more. "Please, father, I didn't betray you. Dillion is behind this, not me. It's not too late to halt this. Father." Alistair grabbed Darius's forearm with his calloused hands and pulled him down from his mount with one powerful tug. "I beg you, don't do it. Don't." "Stop making this harder than it already is, Darius." Robick's voice cracked like splitting ice, his shoulders rigid as he fixed his gaze on the forest looming ahead. Wind-swept grey hair whipped about his face, yet he remained motionless, a statue carved from pain. "I raised you as best I could without your mother, but I cannot overlook treason, not even from my blood." Alistair's iron grip propelled Darius through the frost-laden meadow, his boots leaving deep furrows in the grass. They weaved between the crimson-cloaked figures, their hollow visors tracking his stumbling progress. Through his blurred vision, the tree lines swelled before him, their gnarled trunks bleeding into one another. Each step brought new details into focus. Bark more black than brown, branches that twisted like grasping fingers, roots that upended the earth, and a canopy so dense even the strongest sun would struggle to penetrate. He'd never ventured to this spot before, but a close-up glance told him everything he had feared. "The forbidden forest," he murmured amidst ragged breaths. No happy endings took place here. Bards only spoke of death and misadventures. The forest stood as the only natural border separating his homeland of Valencia from the northern kingdom of Elrond, a barrier more effective than any wall man could build. Alistair, please, speak sense into him. His mentor brought them to a halt, their breaths misting before them. Darius Rarkez, the court of Istril has charged you with treason. We have determined you conspired against the crown with plots to kill the king and usurp the throne for your own political gains. On behalf of King Robic and his people, you are stripped of your royal title and sentenced to indefinite exile. Exile, he thought, the verdict knocking the wind from him. If you return to Valencia, you are to be executed on the spot and without trial. Do you acknowledge your punishment? Alistair's tone was cold and unfamiliar, as if speaking to a common criminal rather than the man he'd helped shape into a warrior. This is wrong. You're all making a mistake. Alistair leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Listen, Darius. You must concede, or this will only go one other way. A stray tear streamed down Darius's cheek. His heart rebelled against the unjust accusations, but something deep within, instinct, urged him to yield. He cast a glance at the forest, knowing death also lurked in its shadows, yet all he could see was Dillion's face burning behind his eyes. Darius, Alistair probed. He craned his neck back around. Every inch of his being rejected the moment, rejected the accusation, rejected the fate being thrust upon him. The words tasted like ash, each syllable sticking to his tongue, fighting to remain unspoken. I accept the punishment of exile. Alistair's chest swelled as he drew a long breath, his shoulders rising beneath his armor in what Darius could only perceive as a relief. He turned towards Robic's distant figure, giving a curt nod that signaled to the king his acceptance of the verdict. For what it's worth, I fought your corner, Darius, but the evidence was too convincing for your father. He shook his head, a subtle motion meant solely for Alistair's eyes. If he believed it, then why am I not being executed? That's a question only he knows the answer to. I suspect he chose to move quickly before word reached the earls and countesses about your betrayal. They'd have called for your immediate execution. Such is the nature of the courts. Alistair's lips tightened into a thin line as he fumbled with his belt, loosening the buckle that held a sword. He extended the weapon towards Darius. Take it. This much you deserve. With trembling fingers, Darius accepted the scabbard, surprised by its unfamiliar weight. The craftsmanship was unlike anything he had ever touched. When he pulled the blade half free from its sheath, intricate lines and polished steel reflected his somber expression. A crimson jewel, set proudly in the crossguard, dazzled despite the low light of dawn. Ralls was a fierce warrior, as were the bearers before him. You bested him in the suffering, and now his weapon is yours. Look after her, and she will serve you as she has many knights before you. I'm sorry we'll never get to see your induction. Darius gazed up, his eyes slick with gratitude and regret. Gratitude for the warmth of his mentor, regret for the grand dreams he would never realize. All stolen by the one he thought he could trust with his life. When he turned around, his father had vanished from sight, leaving only a pale dot on the horizon, where his horse moved between the flickering lights of his escort's torches. Tears now crisscrossed down his face as hopelessness enveloped him. Darius, listen closely. Alistair glanced between him and the forest edge, passing over supplies and a waterskin heavy with liquid. The Forbidden Forest is an unforgiving place. If the sky gods favor you, you'll reach Elrond in one piece. Once there, do not speak with anyone, not even a child. Make haste to Lyri and leave Estos behind for good. Estrana is a vast continent. You will find somewhere to settle and start anew. That much I know. Darius didn't want to heed his words. He wanted to return home, to the safety of Istril and the familiar halls of the palace. but he knew that path was closed to him forever. The remaining Crimson Guards hovered several paces away. Any resistance shown by him would lead to a fight he could never win. "You must leave, Darius." Alistair cleared his throat from the cold, or something much deeper. "May the gods watch over you on your journey out of Estos. I pray you find the life you rightfully deserve." He paused, his jaw tightening. "Now go!" Darius cast one last teary look at the commander, the closest thing to an uncle he had. The standing knights drew their blades, metal scraping against scabbards in a clear warning. He turned to the fortress of ancient pines and began his approach, each step like a hammer striking the final nails of his fate. His fingers danced against the leather of his new sword belt, as they routinely did when he was nervous. He was trained in the guard to always be ready, but no training could prepare him for what lay ahead. The chilled grass crunched beneath his boots, his shoulders sagging lower, and the weight of exile pressing down upon him as the shadowy tree line loomed ever closer. Behind him stands everything he had known. In front of him, only darkness and uncertainty. Darius freed the sword from its scabbard as the waking sunlight caught each groove for perhaps the last time. But like the warriors who wielded it before him, men who stepped forward with steel in their hands and courage in their hearts, so would he. Enjoying the story so far? To uncover the events leading up to this point, claim the free and unpublished prequel, both the audiobook and ebook. The link is waiting for you in the description. Now back to the story. Chapter 2. 10 years later. Darius slipped through the unlocked window, scanning the dimly lit upper landing of the Vaxdal estate. Shadows danced from the fireplace downstairs, stretching upwards and casting an orange hue on the ceiling. He took a breath, steadying his pounding heart. If tonight's raid went well, it would finally end the streak of failures that had plagued Elrond's notorious thieves guild for the past 6 months. Their aim was a straightforward one: steal the nobleman's stash of gold and jewels, then flee without alerting a soul. Darius peered back out the window, eyes darting across the moonlit grounds below. After several heartbeats, he lifted 2 fingers in a practiced signal, beckoning the dark figures crouched beneath the sill. The first to pass through the opening was Alir, his curly hair concealing the caution that laced his face. The floorboards groaned under his slight weight, but swiftly returned to their slumber. Jangar, leader of the guild, was the last to join them. He stood a solid 2 heads above them, wearing a thick auburn beard and a scar that ran from his forehead and disappeared beneath his eye patch. The wooden planks awoke again, with a vengeance that threatened to rouse the sleeping nobleman. "Shh!" Darius hissed. "Don't get your cock in a twist, tittling," Jangar rebutted, his tongue as sharp as the axe on his back. "He's outnumbered 3 to 1. You sure about that?" "Of course I am." Darius didn't know what to believe anymore. Their sources had proven less than trustworthy of late, draining both the guild's coin and patience. Yet, for whatever reason, only he seemed bothered enough to question the information. Everyone else? They fell mute. He knew full well, had it not been for his talents with sword and lockpick, Jangar wouldn't tolerate his outspoken nature. Such was the law of banditry. Every person had a role to play and assets to lend. Failure to deliver, and you were discarded like lame cattle. It was a life that Darius begrudgingly accepted 10 summers ago, when Jangar discovered him, injured and weary, on one of Elrond's many open roads. He had been wandering like a ghost, half dead, half alive. Alistair's warning about not speaking to anyone faded from memory after endless weeks of barely surviving the Forbidden Forest. Though the wounds from his unjust banishment were still raw, both physical and emotional, he remembered how Jangar's piercing, one-eyed gaze had assessed him that day. Not with pity, but with a calculating assessment of potential. It seemed he saw more than a broken Valencian clinging onto his lost wanderer lie once he found a use case for Darius. And here he was, a decade later, standing in a very luxurious Vaxdal home. Yet inside, an emptiness lingered, like he was wearing another man's skin. The private quarter should be there. Jangar pointed across the landing, quelling his gruff northern accent. You both take the other rooms. Do nothing until I give you the signal, all right? Darius and Alia nodded. And for the sake of Sir Kaelin's spirit, if anyone gets in your way, send them to the gods. With that, Jangar crept forward, careful not to awaken any more floorboards. Darius leaned over the polished oak banister, taking in the room beneath. Velvet-upholstered chairs circled an ornate hearth, while delicate vases perched on marble pedestals. Tapestries depicting pastoral scenes hung between silver-framed mirrors, their edges glinting in what little moonlight filtered through the windows on the upper and lower floors. Everything about the space spoke of the careful curation only a Vaxdal merchant could afford, but it wasn't what they skulked in the shadows for. The loot, so their source swore, was in the master quarters. When Jangar reached the tailor's room, he turned and motioned for Darius and Alia to get into position. Alia slipped towards the door beside Jangar, while Darius edged along the wall to claim the neighboring room, his fingertips brushing against the wallpaper as he moved into place. His heart beat like a tribal drum. Jangar described it as the thrill of thieving. Darius simply called it being low-life scum. He looked to Alia, whose hands rested between his dagger and the iron handle. A muscle twitched beneath his eye, the only betrayal of the tension coiled through his frame. He knew that look well. Alia's quiet nature hid a focused and fiercely obedient side. He made for a loyal comrade and a good friend. When Jangar finally gave the nod, he was the first to enter his quarter, vanishing into the shadows. Darius watched idly as Jangar pushed open his door and revealed a dimly lit room. A mound of furs on the bed rose and fell with deep rhythmic breaths, blissfully unaware of their presence. Jangar's boots whispered across the floorboards as he ghosted to the bedside when steel scraped softly against leather. In a blink, his fingers wrapped around the dagger's worn grip. Darius shook his head, willing him not to do what he feared would come next. Faint light caught the blade as it cut through the air. A wet thud broke the silence, followed by rustling sheets and a choked gasp. The bed frame creaked beneath violent spasms, limbs thrashing, fingers clawing at the bedding, until finally, mercifully, the movement ceased. Darius squeezed his eyelids shut, and his lips formed the words of an old Valencian prayer. May the gods guide your way. For that I pray. The whisper died in his throat when he entered his assigned room, his shadow morphing into monstrous proportions. It wasn't entirely dark, but a pervasive, stale aroma hung in the atmosphere. An unvarnished wardrobe and chest of drawers jutted from the walls. Against the far wall, iron bedposts rose from the floorboards, supporting a narrow mattress barely wide enough for one. Darius had to double-take himself when the silhouette of a young woman wrapped tightly in a sheet rolled onto her back. He was no stranger to killing guards, watchouts, or anyone deemed an immediate threat. These sins were easier to carry. But women and children? That was a line he had yet to cross. She groaned and tossed towards him. What little light shone into the room rested on her pure, spotless skin. Darius's heart pounded as her eyelashes fluttered, once, twice, before parting to reveal dark irises beneath. He didn't move, but when her lips parted, stretching into an O of horror, he knew he had to act. In one fluid motion, he crossed the space between them, his palm clamping over her mouth. Her scream died against his skin, nothing more than a muffled whimper in the darkness. She fought and thrashed beneath his grip. For a slight lady, she packed plenty of force, but her struggles were no match for Darius's strength. Through panicked eyes, her gaze darted around the room, taking in the half-open door, the empty landing beyond, and the intruder restraining her. Past her frantic panting, Darius caught the sounds of drawers being torn apart in the main bedroom. It made his blood go cold. Unlike Aaliyah, who was silent as a mouse, Jangar lacked the patience and appreciation for stealth. He leaned close to the woman, presumably a housemaid going by her grey rags, and pressed a finger to his lips. "If you want to see the morning sun," he whispered, "you must listen to me." Her thrashing stilled as her eyes fixed on the vacant threshold at his back. Something in her expression shifted, like she sensed there were worse fates awaiting her if she refused to cooperate. A quick bob of her head signaled her understanding. "You need to hide," he murmured, careful not to let his Valencian accent slip. Darius's gaze darted from the wardrobe to beneath the bed when the floorboards creaked under heavy footfalls. No, his heart stopped. "Quick!" He ushered the woman into the space below, pulling the sheet down to conceal her. The shadows in the hallway stretched longer, darker, Jangar's silhouette drawing nearer. "Aaliyah! Darius!" he called out. "I think we've been sold up the creek again." With a racing pulse, Darius whirled around to find Jangar's burly figure hovering in the doorway. "Well, did you find anything?" "Nothing," he gulped. "Just dirty linen and a stale odor." "Why are you speaking with an Elronian tongue? The nobleman is dead." "Habit, that's all." Darius let his false accent fade away. He tried to steer the conversation outside of the room, but Jangar blocked his exit. "So, you've got bat droppings?" He sighed, his massive palms clutching the doorframe. Darius sighed. "Not even a feather to sweeten the pot." "Bollocks!" Jangar kissed his teeth. When Aaliyah appeared, he stepped away from the threshold. "Please tell me you have better news than tittling here." Darius hated that nickname, though he preferred it over Valencian dog. "Only this." Aaliyah held up a silver necklace. It would barely cover their expenses. "Did you seek what we came here for?" His dark eyes narrowed at the trinket. "No." "I thought your source—" "He lied." Jangar scorned. "He'll regret ever crossing me when I get my hands on him." Heat travelled up Darius's neck. The big man didn't take failings well, nor those who made a mockery of him. As Jangar's rage boiled over, he lashed out and struck the painting of Lyri that hung on the wall. A great hole ripped through it, creating an obvious void. Streets ran out of control, hills collapsed, and mountains thrust inward. The torn canvas seemed to taunt him. Lyri should have been his way out of Estos. Fabric rustled underneath behind, followed by a muffled noise that spiked his pulse. Aaliyah glanced at him, a flash of worry creeping across his face. "What was that?" Jangar's head snapped towards the bed, his brows furrowed. "I heard nothing," Aaliyah lied smoothly, glancing at Darius. "Did you?" "No." He forced himself to sound casual. "Only the frustration of 3 pissed-off men." "Then perhaps we should leave this forsaken city before more bad luck finds us," Aaliyah suggested. "Dawn is near, and I fear some might ask of the nobleman's whereabouts when his shop fails to open in the morning." The silence stretched as Jangar mulled over Aaliyah's suggestion, his jaw working back and forth like a mill grinding wheat. 1 heartbeat, 2, 3. With each passing breath, Darius's mind conjured increasingly horrific scenarios of what might happen if he discovered the woman. Would he kill her? Rape her? The very thought sent ice through his veins. "Fine," Jangar spat on the floor. "Let's go." Darius watched as the hulking figure moved towards the window and cocked one leg over the sill, followed by the other. Every groan of his leather boots, each scratch against the wooden frame, eased the tension until his disgruntled silhouette vanished into the night. Aaliyah clapped Darius's shoulder. "The guild is no place for warm hearts. You know this." A somber pause hung between them. "Nor ones that long to be somewhere else," he replied. "We may be Jangar's best thieves, but that will not stop him from making examples of us. It's just a matter of time before your morals get you caught." His friend's hand slipped away as Alea moved to the window and climbed out into the darkness beyond. An unruly silence descended upon Darius as he stood alone on the landing. It was like the ghost of the tailor presided over him at that very moment, studying the filth that trespassed into his home and robbed him of his life while he slept. He glanced over his shoulder to find two terrified eyes locked onto his own. The woman's pale fingers clutched the fabric's frayed edge, her knuckles white and trembling. He promised she would see the sunrise, and now he prayed her gratitude would slow any alarm until they'd put Vaxdal far behind them. Chapter 3. 2 days of biting wind brought them within sight of the guild's hideout, the lights of Vaxdal thankfully long behind them. They managed to ghost past the city walls, while the watchmen huddled around their braziers, too focused on fighting the cold to notice the shadows slipping by. Winter's wrath was very much alive in Elrond. Nobody wanted to man the gates, especially at night. It was a clean escape, but the bitter weather proved just as dangerous as any pursuit. As they rode through the familiar woodland on horseback, Darius's posture slumped at the sight of Luther's lair. Sat by the feet of the frosty peaks, the ancient slabs of stone holding up the ruin made for excellent cover, but a terrible dwelling. Laying beneath the snow was a labyrinth of carved tunnels that the Thieves' Guild called home. Only, it wasn't home. It was a dingy and desperate excuse for a hideout that Darius came to loathe. The lair composed of 3 main rooms, a living area where everyone cooked, ate, planned raids, and got lousy drunk, a private quarter for His and Her Majesty, Jangar, and Vresha, and finally a cramped room that housed the remaining guild members. Darius dismounted and tied his horse in the nearby stable, the frigid air freezing his face to such a point that to dare even the slightest smile risked splitting his lips open. "I can't imagine they're going to be thrilled," Alea said, patting down his steed with a frank expression. "Don't be such a gloom weaver." Wisps of warm breath billowed from Jangar's nose. Alea ignored the jab, and together they descended the weathered steps of the ruin. Jangar knocked on the reinforced door the usual 3 times, followed by a measured 4th. They didn't have to wait long until the metal hinges creaked and the heavy barrier inched open. Through the gap, Boland peered out at them, his glacial eyes matching the frozen droplets clinging to Darius's stubble. He was the longest-serving member in the guild, and a quick take of their faces told the veteran all he had to know. This could break them. His goatee twitched as he spoke. "Get out of my way!" Jangar barged past him, ducking to avoid the low-hanging ceiling. He led them down the dozen uneven steps and into the cavern's living quarters, where Vresha, twin brothers Philip and Colin, and Graham rose to their feet. What had been a flourishing band of 30 now dwindled to a mere 8 souls, a spate of desertion and botched raids to blame. Philip's knuckles whitened around the wooden cup, his gaze flickering between Jangar and Darius. Beside him, Colin leaned forward, the neck tight as a bowstring. Their eyes gleamed with a hunger that had nothing to do with the meager rations scattered across the table, but a hunger born from weeks of failure. Graham absently traced a finger along a jagged crack on the table's surface, the motion betraying the restless energy beneath his skin. The last scraps of salted meat looked to have been divided days ago. "I will not beat around the rosebush. We were lied to again," Jangar announced. He had long developed a habit of deflecting responsibility by using words like us or we instead of me and I. Outside of his murderous ways, it was a trait that annoyed Darius the most. "What?" Vresha asked. "Open your lug-holes, lass. It was another failed raid," Jangar exclaimed, before thinking better of his tone. "Sorry. I'm weary and pissed off beyond belief." She strode over to him and placed her pale hand over his bouldering shoulder. She was tiny compared to him, almost a child's size. "It's not your fault. You're tired and cold." Her comment lit annoyance in Darius. No, it was entirely his wrongdoing. He had fallen for yet another false lead and dragged the rest of them through the pits of failure with him. Vresha shot a look between him and Alea, her dark gaze filled with unspoken blame. "So, we were sold a lie?" "Why do you sound surprised?" Darius replied. "Spare me the sarcasm." The crackling logs hissed and spat, orange flames licking upward and casting flickering shadows across everyone's muted expressions. No one moved to ease the strain. No one dared to mediate. Cowards, the lot of them. Even the distant drip of water from the cavern's ceiling seemed to pause, waiting for his response. Darius cleared his throat and tried again. "All we found were goblets, a bracelet, and barrels of wine. If Vaxdal wasn't so far away, I may have brought one back. The gods know we could all use a drink." Vresha jabbed her finger his way, a sneer enveloping her long and narrowed face. "I've reached my limit with you." "Enough!" Jangar snapped. A muscle in Darius's jaw relaxed, his shoulders dropping a fraction. She had always possessed an uncanny talent for becoming an unbearable nuisance when riled. She withdrew her digit, her lips still pinched. If her eyes could set Darius ablaze, he would be ash by now. Whoever sold us this false information must pay, not only in lost gold, but with their tongue. That way they cannot sell any more lies. "Trust my words," Jangar muttered, his tone sure. "He'll wish he never crossed me." Darius fought the urge to scoff at his hollow threat. The harsh truth stared them in the face. Their reputation meant nothing these days, and Jangar didn't need two eyes to see that. They were more akin to old dogs with missing teeth. Yet, be it denial, pride, or stubbornness, he did not want to acknowledge it. The big man was many things, but stupid wasn't one of them. "Revenge must come another day," Alea said with a sensible voice. "Food should be our first priority. Our bellies cannot wait much longer." "And neither can our coffers," Vresha snapped. "With respect, if we don't eat soon, the guild will become a crypt of starved corpses." "He's right, love. We're famished," Jangar added. A subtle twitch rippled across the bridge of her nose as she crossed her arms and shifted her weight, finally conceding to sense. Darius couldn't tell if it was her small stature, a lack of food, or a woman's cycle making her act like this, but it was grating on his skin. "I suggest Darius and I harvest whatever the woodland provides. Boars make for easier targets this time of year, for there are fewer shrubs to hide behind." Alea turned to him. "What do you say, brother? Fancy a late morning hunt?" The idea of venturing from their warm hideout held little appeal, yet it seemed preferable to weathering more of Vresha's outbursts. He bobbed his head hesitantly, then gave a firm nod. "Yes, I could use the fresh air." "Didn't you have enough on the ride back?" Vresha snorted. Darius met her fiery gaze. "I did, but there's a certain stench here my nose cannot tolerate." "Knock it off, tittling," Jangar warned. "I want to see a fat pig curled over your shoulders when you return." "We'll do our best." Alea disappeared into the shared quarters, returning with 2 bows and quivers full of arrows. Taking his plain wooden longbow from Alea's outstretched hand, Darius couldn't help but notice the stark contrast between their weapons. Alea's red oak bow, with its elegant leather-wrapped grip marked by perfect stripes, made Darius's own look like a child's training weapon. Though he was no match for Alea's skill with arrows, the shame of accepting such a basic tool still pricked at his pride. "Let's go while there is vigor in our legs." "Let us." Leaving, Jangar yelled, "Don't be all day." "The next raid won't strategize itself." "Can it not wait until tomorrow?" Darius turned. "We only just got back from this one." "No." "Why not?" "Because I said so." Alea's face contorted. "Why do I sense this isn't an ordinary plunder?" Jangar's good eye flicked towards Vresha, her bottom lip tucking beneath her teeth. a telltale habit that spoke of a secret Darius preferred not to learn. Around him, Bolin and the others only compounded this desire. Their downcast faces and furrowed brows suggested there was more to this planned raid than anyone wanted to share. "What is it?" Darius's tone deepened. After an insufferable pause, Jangar's mood shifted from one of gloom to childlike excitement. "If we pull this off, it'll be the greatest plunder this guild has ever known. You'll be swimming in gold, whores, land, inns. We can have it all." Vresha cleared her throat. "Perhaps we'll skip the brothel," he added. Darius pushed past the levity, his voice almost a growl. "You didn't answer my question. What will we be raiding?" A deep breath inflated Jangar's barreled chest, then escaped through flared nostrils. "The Valga treasury." Darius's fingers, moments ago, relaxed against his bow, now curled into fists. "Have you lost all sense?" "Look around, you idiot!" Jangar bared his stained teeth. "We have no coin, no food, and no other raids worthy of getting out of bed for. This opportunity only comes once a year. I'll be damned to let it go again." "What opportunity exactly?" Alir asked. "King Jeffert Tadol's name day." Darius threw his hands up in exasperation. "This gets better and better. Not only do you want us to empty Elrond's pockets, but to do so on the king's birthday. What army do you think we possess?" "We won't need one," Jangar retorted. "The treasury will be light on guards. While the city celebrates from dusk to dawn, that is when we strike. By the time the capital learns of our exploits, we'll be long gone." Alir's face went blank. "Why now?" "Because I'm tired of living like pissing rats. Nothing good ever comes from desperation. You know this." Darius glanced at his fellow thieves, searching their faces for any sign of agreement, but found only silence. "It's only desperate if you don't have a plan." Jangar huffed. "Elrond's got more gold than they can spend, and I say it is about time we help ourselves to a fat sack of it. I'll not rot in this hole for the rest of my sodding life." At last, there was something he and Darius could agree on. To die in this place was never on his cards either, but even the waft of starting anew, far away from the guild, couldn't tempt him into this reckless plan. "If memory serves me well," Alir paused, "the king's name day is in 3 days." Darius's stomach sank. "A heist like this requires months to strategize properly, years even. We'd be walking straight to our deaths." Jangar charged across the living area, getting within inches of his face. "I lead this guild," he bellowed. "You'll do as I say." Darius's posture stiffened. He caught Alir's subtle headshake, a silent warning to hold his tongue. He knew the risks of entering the capital, but he couldn't agree to the foolishness of the plan, even if it risked a beating or worse. A smug grin plastered across Vresha's features as she sauntered into view. "We live in unusual times, Darius. Either pivot or perish." "Is that a threat?" "The raid is happening, whether or not you like it. Accept it or don't bother returning from your little hunt," she said. "There's no room for cowards here." There was something about that last part that incensed him. How dare she speak of cowardice while hiding behind Jangar? In all the seasons Darius served the guild, he had never seen her dagger leave its scabbard. She contributed nothing. No meals prepared, no crockery scrubbed, no effort made to keep their hideout habitable. Such mundane tasks were beneath her, left to the remaining members to shoulder. Yet she spoke as though courage was built into her, lording over the lair with demands while lifting not a single finger to aid them. Ridiculous. Darius pulled away from Jangar's fiery gaze, nudging Alir towards the dark mouth of the lair's entrance. "Come on, I need that fresh air." His eyes swept everyone one last time. Jangar's twisted sneer, Vresha's satisfied smirk, the uncertain flicker in Bolan's expression. Darius' boots scraped against the stone steps, each footfall echoing the tension they were leaving behind. Alir followed, his breath creating thin wisps of mist in the cold air. For once, The whistling wind came as a relief against the heat of his skin. Ahead, the narrow path of ice, earth, and dead leaves promised distance and respite from the dank existence of the lair. The sun was at its highest when the pair entered a snowy glade. There, they had an uninterrupted view of the mountains. Dagger-like peaks pierced through rolling clouds, their snow-capped tips glinting in the midday light. An ethereal veil of mist coiled around the mountain's base, dancing and swirling as though alive. Higher up, ravens rode the gusts, bucking the wild currents with outstretched wings. "The treachery," he breathed, still feeling the burn of his earlier confrontation. "The man's mind is a broken compass." "Think of it this way," Alia said. "If we pull it off, you'll finally have the chance to leave Estos. Please tell me you haven't bought into his disillusion." "I have not. I sense a but. I have not spent the last 12 years in the shadows to come out poorer than I did going in. I despise the idea as greatly as you. Trust me. It's just what? You want to die? What other prospects do we have, Darius?" The crunch of brittle leaves under their boots fell silent as Alia turned his gaze upon him. Darius gazed down at the blades of grass poking through winter's debris. Memories of his harrowing passage through the forbidden forest flashed before him, a grim reminder that no challenge could rival those perilous moments. Yet this mission, this act of suicide, seemed determined to prove him wrong. "How did we end up here, Alia? We're better than this. All the more reason we should consider this raid. It would make up for some years lost here." "No," Darius shook his head. "We could leave tonight, start fresh somewhere else. We are not those same rejected sons who first joined. We're capable men. Picking locks and stealing from others are hardly skills to be proud of." "Then we learn new ones," he countered. "I speak much about my desires, but hear so few of yours. Do you not yearn to harvest your own crop and have children? What about sharing quarters with a beautiful wife instead of unwashed men?" A flicker of surprise crossed Alia's features. His mouth parted slightly, and his gaze grew distant, as though peering through a window into a life he'd scarcely imagined. These were the trappings of the guild. Not only did it rob you of morals, but also your aspirations. Despite Alia being 2 summers younger than Darius, it seemed he had resigned to the same listless spirit that plagued their older comrades. "I hear the regions east of Estrana are home to exotic trees that bear strange fruits," he said softly, almost delicately, with a heat unlike anything we've ever known. Alia's gaze glazed over, as if he were already picturing this faraway world. "Yes, they do." A flutter of elation stirred in Darius' chest, the first actual glimpse of hope he'd felt in years. The seas are said to be like bathwater, warm, clear, and full of colourful fish. "I've never been fond of fish." "Then admire them from the many white beaches that govern the shoreline." The corners of Alia's mouth lifted as a hearty chuckle escaped his lips. "Yes." "Then leave with me, brother." The breeze whispered through the clearing between them, and in that moment, the light in his friend's eyes faded. "Elron is my home. I was born here," he said. "It's all I've ever known. That doesn't say you should die here." A heavy pause dragged between them. "I once knew Valencia, and look how that turned out." Alia's counter took him aback. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. I want out of the guild as much as you, but such dreams require gold, and lots of it. If we are to wander the vast plains of Estrana and wallow on sandy beaches, we must take the raid. It's our only choice." Darius could not hide his disappointment, but he also couldn't deny the wisdom behind his friend's words. A gust swept through the clearing as Alia spoke again. "Can I tell you another thing I dream about?" "Go on." "For a boar to stumble out from these trees and surrender his body without so much as a squeal. Perhaps we'll find him already cooked and seasoned too." Darius chuckled at the absurdity of it, shaking his head as he imagined a fully prepared feast waiting for them in the wilderness. The thought only made his empty stomach growl louder. "What's wrong with venison?" "It lacks the fat my lips crave." Alir pulled an arrow from his quiver. "Come on, brother, let's hunt while the day is strong. Merely talking of dreams won't fill our stomachs. Food will." "The hunting is all yours today." Alir's brows bunched together. "What do you mean?" Darius's eyes ascended the white-capped mountains that towered above the pines. Alir traced his gaze. "You're not seriously thinking of seeing the man-creature again, are you?" Darius smiled. "Not only are you a fine archer, but it seems you can read minds too." "Brother, you haven't eaten properly in days. If you get stuck up there when the sun sets..." "I won't allow that to happen. It will only take me 2 to 3 hours to ascend, and less than 1 to climb back down." Alir appeared doubtful. "Why now?" "The seer is the only other soul besides you I trust in this forsaken kingdom. His prophecies have scarcely been untrue. If we are foolish enough to go along with this ludicrous raid, I want to know what we're in for." "Then we should travel together," Alir said. "No. You are our best hunter. We need food, or else we'll be the ones hunted after Jangar casts us out." "Fine," he sighed. "There's no point in me trying to convince you otherwise." "You're in danger of becoming a sensible man," Darius joked. "At least one of us is. Here." Alir handed him some more arrows. "Make every shot count. The seer might refuse you for not bringing an offering." "My bow skills aren't that bad." "You haven't loosed an arrow in weeks." "Neither have you." Darius slipped the extra projectiles into his quiver. "But that's the point. You're not me." "Is that an ego I detect?" Alir smirked. "Go while there's still daylight. Meet me back here by dusk, or I'll be forced to climb those treacherous peaks to fetch you." Don't forget to claim your free ebook and audiobook of the prequel. The link is in the description. Now back to the story. Chapter 4. Darius battled against the frigid gale as he ascended the mountain, a dead hair dangling from his frozen fingers. It was a lucky shot, really, the sort that would have impressed Alir had he not seen the preceding 20 attempts that scattered like drunk pigeons caught in a storm. Still, it was better than being turned away. The seer never gave out his foresight for free, a fact Darius had learned the hard way once before. The wind howled mercilessly when he reached the summit. He inhaled sharply, hazarding a glance down the cliff edge. Through the sailing mist, tall pine trees that once dwarfed him only hours ago were mere dots. He wondered if Alir's hunt had been successful or not, or whether he was still prowling the woodland for food. He inspected the hare a final time, which remained frozen in its death pose, and trudged through the snow that had claimed all feeling in his toes. A dark shape emerged beyond the flurry of white specks, morphing into wooden steps, flimsy decking, and a cabin that promised warmth. He placed one foot on the first step, wincing as the wood groaned beneath his weight. Each subsequent stair felt more precarious than the last until he reached the door. Just as his knuckles hovered inches from the weathered timber, apprehension halted him. Perhaps ignorance was better than confirmation. The thought nagged at him. He'd made this grueling climb only to have his fears proven right, that he and the others were dead men if they took on this raid. Whether curiosity or the desire for warmth, he knocked on the door and retreated a step. 10 heartbeats passed. 20. Above, the lantern swung wildly, casting jerky shadows across the cabin's walls. Just as he feared he traveled up here to become an ice sculpture, a distinct sound hummed beneath the wind's endless howl, something soft and deliberate moving within. Footsteps. The wooden slat slid open, and 2 milky eyes amid a bed of wrinkles emerged. "Who seeks the sight here?" "Darius?" "Yes, I remember you," the seer croaked. "Do you have an offering?" He lifted the dead hare, and the oracle eyed the catch for a few heartbeats before closing the viewing slot and unbolting the entrance. As the door peeled back, the decrepit figure appeared in the doorway, dressed in a hooded cloak that mercifully hid most of his face. "The gods said you'd appear one of these days." His black lips curled upright, revealing a row of grey teeth. "Come in." Bony remains of birds, rodents, cats, and heavens knew what else, swayed from various parts of the ceiling. Darius weaved between the macabre display, his gaze locked on the roaring hearth at the room's center, where flames danced beneath a pot of churning fluid. One whiff of the bubbling stew was reason enough to not peer inside. Darius set down the hair and crouched beside the heat source, gathering his frozen palms. He let out an unending sigh as the ice crystals around his reddened knuckles dissolved, and feeling crept back into his numb fingers. Across the hearth, the seer's face flickered in and out of view, highlighting the deep furrows carved into his skin. He could see why Allaire called him a man-creature. Legend said that seers were masterful wizards with one important distinction. They had an inclination for black magic. Darius had heard whispered tales of their banishment since childhood, how the white-robed mages of Cladstein would escort these afflicted practitioners beyond their pristine walls in the dead of night. While some perished in exile, others scratched out an existence in the realm's forgotten corners. No simple task in a land where a false whisper of magic could see you swinging in the gallows. The heat of the hearth penetrated Darius's core, and a bitter irony settled over him. Here he was, seeking help from an outcast as one himself. Were it not for the injustice still churning in his gut, he might have chuckled at how similar their stories were. "So, what can I assist you with today, Darius?" He kept his hands over the fire. "You could start by telling me why the gods predicted my visitation." "I'm afraid I don't know their reasons. They never told me," the seer rasped. "Maybe as the day matures, we will learn more. Sadly, I haven't got the luxury of ceaseless chatter. If I was cursed with eternal life, then perhaps I would. But mortal matters require me to make this brief." "Cursed? What brings about such a strong feeling?" "With respect, living one man's lifetime is hard enough." The seer fell silent, giving way to the simmering cauldron that filled the room, drowning out the gusts that rattled the wooden shelter. "Do you not think I detest the burden of immortality?" "You probably do, but that is of no matter right now. There are talks of a grand raid in the coming days, and I'd like to know any foresight you might have." The flickering flames reflected in the oracle's milky eyes as he leant forward, his sunken face frozen in concentration. Seconds stretched into minutes, marked only by the soft pops of burning wood. Not a muscle twitched beneath the seer's tattered robes. The seer dragged his tongue through the fire over and over, performing his grim ceremony, as he always did. "Yes, I see something," he muttered between licks. "Some will call it the heist of the century." Darius searched the prophet's gaunt face for any trace of success or failure, discerning nothing. "Though it shall come at a hefty price." The words sank into Darius's stomach, but beneath the bleak telling, he sensed a flicker of hope. "Are you suggesting it could be successful?" "It depends on how you define it." "I'm not sure I follow. I can only say what I see. And what I see is a time where thieves are more concerned with staying alive than attaining affluence." The seer tongued the fire once more. "I also see a time when the guild is no more. Rivals will become friends, and some friends will become enemies. Your journey is only beginning, Darius. Your speech is clever, but it's as empty as the words of a brothel worker," he said, his voice tightening with annoyance. "I need simple answers. Will I survive this heist and walk away wealthy or not?" "Where questions linger, doubts lie," the outcast replied, eyes fixed on the fire. Darius huffed and rose to his feet, his patience finally spent. I didn't freeze my manhood for philosophy. I came for foresight, not a palm reading. You are not the first to show such displeasure, nor are you destined to be the last. I state what I see, but no more. Darius kicked the hair towards the seer's crossed legs. Enjoy your feast. Something tells me this will be my final offering to you. The oracle said nothing. Instead, he gathered up the lifeless creature and separated its head from its body in one swift, sickening twist. Darius grimaced and made haste for the door, uninterested in watching any more of this gruesome display. As he was about to yank the handle and let the bitter cold invade the warmth, the seer spoke once more. The raid should be the least of your concerns. It's what comes after that matters. Prince Rarkez. Darius's hand froze, every hair on the back of his neck standing. He craned himself around slowly, his heart hammering. What did you just call me? The oracle paused his butchery. The sky gods have long told me who you are. Then you are speaking with the wrong ones. Oh, but I am not, the seer replied with an unsettling grin that revealed his crooked teeth. The fire caught the glint in his eyes as he methodically butchered the small animal carcass with his gnarled fingers. In a blur, Darius went from standing by the door to having his sword pointed at the sorcerer's throat. The blade trembled in his grip as rage and worry coursed through his veins. Nobody in Elrond knew of his true identity, except for Alir. No one. It was a secret he guarded more than his own life. You hold much resentment towards your father's name, don't you? The seer swallowed. How can you forge a path forward when you are always looking behind? Quiet. Darius pressed the blade deeper, breaking his leathery skin. A dark droplet seeped from the wound, its shade closer to black than blood. Most unnerving of all was how the oracle didn't react to the cut. Your journey will require sacrifices, some just, some unjust. No, it won't. Your heart harbors more empathy than you allow yourself to reveal. I don't care, Darius scorned. I'm not going on any adventure you speak of. Yet that is your destiny, for you are the vanguard of this millennium. Lies. If I am destined to be this savior, the word tasted disgusting on his tongue, then why are there no specifics? Why do you insist on speaking vaguely? His knuckles whitened around the blade's hilt as frustration took an even greater hold. The seer's cryptic words and that unsettling smile made his skin crawl. Every instinct screamed at him to end this farce, to silence the weathered prophet and his fanciful predictions. The gods are mysterious. I only see snippets. The sorcerer's bleached eyes looked through him rather than at him, as though gazing into some distant realm Darius couldn't perceive. Then tell them to speak plainly, or I'll slit your throat. The silence stretched like a bowstring pulled taut, broken only by the crackle of flames in the hearth. The seer's weathered lips quivered, parted, then clamped shut again before, at last, he spoke. Your father is dying. If your brother takes the throne, tyranny will fall over Valencia. But this is the lesser of your troubles. Something much darker brews south in the basin of Corden. He fell silent, creating a tension that hummed with unspoken power. Vrakor is rising once more. The mere utterance of that name sucked the heat out of the cabin. The blade in Darius's hand grew cold, its metal turning brittle against his trembling fingers. Do not tempt air into his lungs. Cease such language. Oh, but the air has already found them. It can't be. The history books say otherwise. History is written by victors, and only ever understood generations later. As much as men enjoy heroic endings, they scarcely exist. The outcast paused. If you do not heed this warning, Vrakor's resurgence will doom Estos, and his darkness could spill into the rest of the continent. The silence that followed felt alive, watching, waiting. It was as though an unseen portal had opened up before them, now that the Dark Lord's name hung in the air like a vexed ghost. Darius's breath caught, a reaction bred into him, and every child since they learned to read and write. They were taught to fear even thinking of that cursed being, let alone speaking his name aloud. Bards were forbidden to regale tales about him, and most hardened warriors, men who'd stared death in the face countless times, wouldn't dare utter it. But Sir Cailan struck him down 1,000 years ago. Darius lowered his sword. I don't understand this speak of revival. He did, yet the men and wizards of Estos made a grave error. They did not destroy Vrakor's body. Burying him several hundred feet beneath Cordon was not enough. Darius ran his fingers through his hair, mind still reeling. Worms would have devoured him by now, surely. Nothing devours the Dark Lord except fire. So long as he has an empty vessel, his spirit can return to it, and it seems it already has. The seer resumed his butchery of the hair, seemingly untroubled by the gravity of his disclosure. Vrakor is neither man, wizard, nor beast. He's all of them. I can only assume they thought burying him beneath a mountain of dirt would suffice. Darius remained in something of a daze as the oracle tossed the hare's limbs into the bubbling pot and climbed to his feet. If you care for the region that gave you life and so much meaning, you must first reclaim the throne that was wrongfully stolen from you, he added. Then it is imperative you ally with Elrond. Impossible, Darius cut him off. I'm an exile. My father will kill me if I set foot in Valencia. And as for Elrond, they would sooner see every man, woman, and child raped and burned to ash than ever unite with us. Too much blood has been spilt. Yet you have the power to end what your forefather started. Darius's brows bunched together. What do you mean by that? King Darius Rarkez was the one who threw this region into disarray. That's a falsehood. Wagner Tadol did. Nonsense, the seer interjected way too calmly for a claim this bold. Valentius stood beside Wagner and the great mage Alduran as they faced Vrakor in that fateful clash. Despite their combined strength, their blades and magic proved insufficient against his might. Wagner was thrown aside like a child's toy, Alduran's shields shattered, and even the mighty Valentius stumbled before the Dark Lord's power. And what does this have to do with Valentius's supposed treachery? Because it was an Elronian hellhand who made history that day, the seer replied. While the kings and mages faltered, Sir Cailan Grey's steel found the gap in Vrakor's defense. The Dark Lord's death cry sent shockwaves across Cordon as the blade pierced his form, sending his entire army into the void with him. Yet this victory bore bitter fruit. Cailan died upon his brave act, the raw power claiming his life before his sword could be withdrawn. And your forefather, King Valentius, well, his pride was forever hurt. The glory of slaying Vrakor had been stolen by an Elronian warrior. Darius's hand twitched over the pommel of his sword. Knowing a hellhand's sacrifice changed the course of history, still held a sore spot over most Valencians, even banished ones like him. That wounded pride festered, the seer continued, with many outside of Estos believing it was what led to the great betrayal, and the rift between the nations that persist to this day. Now you see why you must rebuild these bridges. The kingdoms must stand united once more, as they did all those centuries ago, or Vrakor will cast Estos into an age of shadows. Only you can make that change. The words struck Darius like physical blows. Him? Unite the region? The very notion seemed absurd. He was an exile, a man who couldn't even maintain the loyalty of his own brother. No, this is nonsense. He shook his head. The history scrolls. They've lied to you, Rarkez, as they have your people. Valentius broke the alliance, not Wagner. Darius swallowed hard. It won't happen. I refuse to meddle in this madness. The destiny of this region rests in your hands. Fail to heed this call. Fail to rebuild bridges that have long been burnt from betrayal, and entire generations will perish. This is Valencia and Elrond's fight, not mine, Darius protested, though the words felt hollow even as he spoke them. The seer's milky eyes seemed to pierce through him. Just as Sir Cailan Grey didn't choose his destiny that day, neither can you choose yours. Sometimes the greatest acts of courage come not from those who seek glory, but from those who will do what must be done. You are one of those men. They abandoned me, all of them, he shouted, old wounds tearing open inside him. My future is not here in Elrond, nor is it down south. This raid will make good of that. The sky gods will judge. Damn the gods! Darius exclaimed, unshed tears collecting around his eyes. They deserted me 10 summers ago. They stole my dreams of becoming a knight of the Crimson Guard and condemned me to a bandit's life. Curse their judgment. It was not they who punished you. It was your brother. He's been waiting for your father to fall for a very long time, but it's not too late to right those wrongs. The oracle retreated to the dark corner of the cabin where dirty linen awaited him. Darius faltered, shaking his head. So that's it? You claim Valentia started all this bloodshed, that I'm the savior who'll stop Vrak? The name caught in his throat, refusing to come out. And now I'm supposed to believe I can simply stride into Valencia and reclaim my birthright? The seer didn't respond. Darius remained rooted as darkness pressed in from every corner. The sorcerer lowered himself onto the tattered bedding and released a long, wheezing breath, saying no more. This wasn't the prophecy he came for, and he was adamant it wasn't his to answer. His father and traitor of a brother should be the ones to clean up this mess, not him. Realizing he'd get nothing more from the seer, he stepped into the howling blizzard, knowing that as much as he would try, life would never be the same. As his lungs filled with frosty air, the raid of Valga's treasury and all the risk it entailed seemed laughably insignificant. Chapter 5. Darius made it down the frosty peaks, just as daylight took its last breath. He cared little for the calmer elements, for his mind was still in the cabin, mulling the seer's prophecy. His life and worldly views seemed at opposite ends to the ones he woke up to. A new dawn was beckoning, bringing with it not light, but a darkness he refused to accept. While traversing a web of trees, their many crooked arms willing him in all directions, he thought about his past. Valencia, his father, Dillion. Let them fall, he snapped. I don't care about the kingdom. Somewhere deep in his chest, a buried anguish steadily pumped, propelling him along the overgrown trail. His boots crunched against dried leaves and twigs, each step a reminder of his exile. When he finally reached the clearing, the setting sun painted a pink aura in the sky, casting long shadows at the mountain's base. He crouched behind a nearby trunk, its rough bark pressing against his leather jerkin, and waited for Aaliyah. It was quiet, save for the occasional rustle of wind through the canopy, though the guild members weren't the only ones to use the woodland. Highwaymen and predatory creatures also lurk in these parts, the highwaymen by far the worst. The isolation of these trails made them an ideal spot for outlaws to carry out their misdeeds. Darius had lost count of the times he discovered the corpses of men, women and children, all robbed of their possessions and dignity. It sickened him to see the depths of human brutality, even among those of the guild. While surveying the area, a figure emerged from the far side of the clearing. It stood over something large, which was difficult to make out. Pinching his finger and thumb together, he whistled. It cut through the stillness like a thin blade, dancing across the frosty landscape, its pitch so delicate it might have been mistaken for the wind's distant sigh. The form stirred, and when it whistled back, he sighed in relief and left the tree line. At last, Aaliyah said. I feared you might have run off with the man-creature. His friend's attempt at jest fell flat as Darius scanned the surroundings with a wary eye. As his attention returned to Aaliyah, he studied the dead form at his feet, a boar, a tidy despatch by the look of it. The boar's neck glistened with a thin sheen of moisture. Did the seer share tidings worth the climb? Nothing that couldn't have waited another day, Darius lied, his gaze glued to the wild pig. It would be enough to feed the guild for 2, maybe 3 days if they were restrained. Perhaps Bolin could make some of his cured meat out of it. Alir studied him for longer than Darius enjoyed. "Your face tells me different. Then your eyes are deceiving you. The day you are adept at lying is the day you kneel before Jangar. It's fine by me if you'd rather not say." Words hovered at the edge of Darius's lips, then retreated, like waves uncertain whether to crash upon the shore. He drew a slow breath. It wasn't the raid the seer spoke of. Well, not nearly as much as I'd have liked. His friend's expectant gaze bore into him. The sorcerer's prophecies, those haunting predictions about the Dark Lord and his dying father, lodged themselves in his throat like thorns. He said that the great enemy is rising once again, that I'm the man to stop him. Alir took a step backwards, deep creases forming between his eyebrows. His lips twitched, then curled upwards at one corner, followed by a harsh breath of air that whistled through his teeth. That's absurd. He's resorted to telling dark stories now? He's a seer. He wouldn't mislead. Darius almost didn't believe his words either. No, he is a twisted outcast who yearns for relevancy. He may have predicted some things in the past, but this is madness. I know, it's irrational, baseless even. Then why does your tone not reflect that? You don't seriously buy the Cretan story, do you? Darius's shoulders rose and fell, his attention drifting from the blood-slicked boar that lay cooling in the frost at their feet. I'm not privy to what's been said up there, but the last thing we need is talk of the Dark Law. Alir couldn't complete the sentence, his breath misting before them. Ignore him, brother. Forget you ever went up there. What if he's right? It's easy to guess the outcome of raids. It either ends in failure or success. There's no middle. He divulged more than just outcomes. You know this. What about the young boy in that failed raid last summer? Darius watched Alir's face harden at the memory. He hated bringing it up, but it was the only way to get the truth out of him. The blacksmith store remained vivid in his mind, a cramped, cluttered space where everything had gone wrong. After the seer's reading, they made every effort to avoid witnesses. He and Alir chose a night when the streets would be empty, lingering until the rain drowned out their footsteps. Yet the boy had appeared, sudden as a ghost, his scream piercing. It wasn't a mere chance. The way the lad had discovered them deep into the early hours felt calculated, almost deliberate, as if some unseen hand had orchestrated their encounter. It ought to have been the father who found them, not his son, but they had no choice. Alir's blow came swiftly, and the boy dropped to the ground like a sack of turnips. He would have been fine, save for a headache and throbbing jaw, had it not been for catching his head on the workbench's corner. Darius never forgot the blood. For what seemed a minor injury, it pooled across the dark floorboards like spilt wine, seeping in the cracks. The boy's chest expanded and contracted in stuttering breaths, each one shallower than the last. He couldn't have been over 11 summers. They tried to bring him back, but his breathing stopped. He would never forget Alir standing beside him. His hands trembled, hands that had never wavered before, not even during the hairiest of raids, and something in his friend's eyes changed that night, as did his loathing of the seer. The sorcerer had warned of a young bystander, but they thought they could best the reading. That was too precise to be a lucky guess, Darius said. Alir struggled to muster a worthy retort, his mind clearly still gripped by the horror of his actions. The revival of the Dark Lord wasn't all he mentioned either. That jolted Alir from his daze. What else? He spoke of my father's coming death and claimed Dillion would grasp power with cruel hands. Should I dismiss the warning, Estos would fall into ruin. Darius replied, eyes distant. Even now, the raspy voice echoed in his mind, reminding him of the choice that lay before him, to remain in exile or to return home and face what awaited him in Valencia. That isn't your burden to carry. That doesn't lessen the consequences. He scratched at the bristle that hugged his jawline, thinking about everything. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the whisper of frost-laden wind through bare branches. A distant howl froze them both to the spot. Darius looked at Alir, knowing full well what that noise belonged to. Blood wolves. "We need to move!" Alir reached down at the boar's hind legs. "Take the front." Darius acted with haste, and together they lifted the boar, which weighed more than expected. Clearly, autumn had been kind to it. I suspect there's at least a mile between us. "May as well be yards to those beasts," Alir strained. They must have caught the scent of the kill. "Let's not dwell on such things. We've had enough misfortune lately." The guild greeted Darius and Alir like victorious warriors when they returned. While remnants of their earlier confrontation with Jangar lingered in the air, they managed to at least be cordial. The same wasn't true for Vresha, who made no attempt to conceal her annoyance. Bolin dragged the boar back to his bench and immediately set to work gutting and butchering the beast. His touch was sure, and his hands quick. For an old man, he seemed to have unending energy, but then, maybe it was sheer hunger spurring him on. He worked without pause until vast chunks of meat were roasting over the fire. It took the rest of the day to cook the boar, but nobody dared to sleep in case they missed out on the feast. As the guild members sat down with their supper, it was as if they had never fallen on hard times. Everyone laughed, talked, and reminisced over memories long since gone. Even Darius and Alir joined in among the chatter, keeping the encounter with the seer to themselves. "So, tittling." Jangar halted Graham's recital of a hilarious story. "Have you decided about the treasury?" Forks clattered against wooden bowls as hands stilled mid-bite. The crackle of the hearth fire seemed to grow louder in the sudden hush, and dozens of eyes swiveled towards Darius, waiting. A half-chewed morsel of meat hung forgotten in Vresha's open mouth. "Well, don't rush to share it with us or anything." Chunks flew from Jangar's lips. "I think you know what my answer is, or must I spell it out?" Vresha leapt from the bench. "I suggest you speak better to the leader of this guild." The big man raised his shovel of a hand to calm the rising temperatures, his only eye focused on Darius. "Let's try again. What is your decision? I want to hear it loud and clear." He forced the half-chewed scrap down his throat, the silence almost deafening. "With little gold and nowhere else to go, I have few options than to raid with you." Alir's features softened with relief, though Darius caught a flicker of guilt cross his face at the reluctant choice. "This doesn't alter my thoughts," he continued. "It's a dangerous idea, and I encourage you to rethink it." "There's nothing to reconsider." Jangar bit into the greasy meat clutched in his oily hands. "My decision is final. We leave tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" Alir asked. "Valga is at least a 3-day ride," Vresha hissed. "If we go any later, we will miss this raid of a lifetime." "And since when did you become his mouthpiece?" Jangar's eye narrowed to a dangerous slit, the firelight casting deep shadows across his taut face, as he fixed Alir with a look that could have melted steel. Alir pushed the final morsel past his lips, his throat bobbing with a forced swallow. The rough bark of the log scraped against his breeches as he heaved himself up, careful to avoid the elbows of Colin and Philip, who sat on either side. "Forgive my insult," he said. "It has been a long day, and my body is weary. Rest is in order." "Yeah, I thought that much." Jangar's voice grated like stone scraping stone. Meeting each guild member's gaze in turn, Alir inclined his head, his shoulders hunched with exhaustion. When his eyes finally settled on Darius, he lingered a moment longer. Without a word, he shuffled away from the warmth of the living area, disappearing into the shadows of their shared quarters. "Sleep beckons me too," Darius lied, rising from the log. With the seer's prophecy and the upcoming raid weighing heavily on his mind, he knew sleep would not come easily. Of course it does, Jangar chuckled. Get what rest you can, tittling. There won't be much of it from tomorrow. This chapter closes, but the journey has just begun. If you crave more untold stories of the divided region and want to be the first to know when the next part drops, then join the Legion today. You'll also immediately be gifted the free prequel in both ebook and audiobook. Find the link in the description.